When we were young.
I I've never been young, but when I met Lily when she was a bright PhD student, I keep visiting Kiel University, and I met her then. She's still a bright academic. She's now a bright academic. She hasn't changed. So Lily is Hamourtziadou, I can never pronounce your name. Hamourtziadou.
I can never pronounce.
Okay. Is a senior lecturer at Birmingham University and principal researcher and analyst. And then she published a very interesting book called Body Count in cooperation with Will and others, and published by Bristol University Press, very kind of good publishing house, and the exact year of the book is 2021. And of course this is not the only book Lily published. Lily published other books as well, The Ethics of Remote Warfare, and then currently you are writing
We just finished writing with Willem, The Human Cost of War.
Human Cost of War. These are all, and of course we are also under the editorial board of Journal of Global Fault Line. So this is what brings us here. And yes, this talk is an interesting one. Western media discourses or approaches to the war in Iraq, Ukraine and Gaza. It's a critical take-home. I think without further ado, I leave the floor to you to speak, and then we'll have enough time to discuss afterwards. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So, I am an academic, however, the main role through which I will be speaking tonight is as a casualty recorder. So I'm the main casualty recorder of the NGO Iraq Body Count. Iraq Body Count was founded in 2002 in anticipation of the invasion of Iraq. And it was founded by people who were against the invasion of Iraq and who knew that it would have a catastrophic impact on the civilian population. So they set up this database that would be populated with incidents we would collect on civilian deaths, resulting from the invasion, but also any other conflicts that arose from the invasion in what became a lawless Iraq. So I will start, first of all, by speaking from my own experience, working with the media on the covering of the Iraq war. That went through many stages, and I'll be able to tell you at which points the media was very interested in reporting and when they stopped reporting, and then restarted to report. Okay, so now as you can see, the reason I chose this is a very recent photo. It's not from Iraq, it's from Gaza, and this is it's an ambulance that has that clearly had people inside. It was hit, and this is the blood of the people coming out. And so my focus really is on specifically how or if crimes against civilians such as this one are reported by Western media. So let me tell you something about Iraq body counts. Now, usually when there is talk about Iraqi deaths, the question people ask is how many? How many? So it's how many? Is it 1 million? Is it 5 million? Is it 10,000? How many? But actually for me as a casualty recorder, it's not the number that is so important. I don't just want to count the deaths, I want to contextualize them. So I want to find out who were the ones. Do we have a name? How did they die? Who killed them? Where did they die? Under what circumstances? I'm much more interested in actually of these killings that I actually have recorded on the Iraq Body Count website. I want to know as much as possible about the specific loss that is each person who died. Very often, and this we see in the Western media, we are told to be interested in which side wins. We want our side, the side we support, to win a particular war. And whatever cost. And we see that now with Ukraine. You know, we want Ukraine to win. Ukraine has to win against Russia. We're told that all the time. And so we must arm Ukraine so it can win against Russia. And it doesn't matter who dies in the process. That becomes a, oh, by the way. For me, it's not a by the way. This is the whole focus of my research. So I want to tell the story as a casualty reporter from the bottom up, to uncover any patterns of harm, effects on the powerless, document the human suffering in any conflict. And for those of you who don't know Iraq body count, I have here the link that I will follow, and I will take you to the website just to see what kind of things I do. And the reason I have this girl is because this is only one of 2 photographs we have. We don't have pictures of victims. We only have this one and a picture of her brother. These were given to us by their father 2 years ago. These children were killed in the invasion in 2003. And I will show you where we have the incident recorded. So let's see if I can, if I can't do this.
Shall I come?
Yes, could you come please? I want to go to the website.
Our website.
Of Iraq body count. Is this YouTube?
This is link. Showing this all this.
This is not YouTube. I want to go online. Not on YouTube.
Okay. Online.
I don't want to watch a video.
Okay. No, no, just
Okay.
Come here.
Ah, this is it. Perfect.
When you need to go back, just come on and tap together.
Okay.
We'll take that.
Okay. So this is the website of Iraq body count. And as you can see, there's a logo, which is this, and it's always the bomber plane, because it all started with the invasion, although it has evolved over the years. And we have the documented civilian deaths. It shows the total here, and that I update that every month, at the end of every month. And if you were there is analysis, we write various things, but what I want to show you is the database. So the database, click on this. So every incident that we record has a link. Oh, there we go. So every incident has a link that you can click on and it will take you to the incident. Now when you see here, you see how many. So it said 4 by airstrikes in Anna west of Anbar, 3 by airstrikes in Al-Qaim, 31 by mortar shells in South Mosul. And by clicking on these, you can have everything that we found out about that particular incident. Now, in order for me to find that 33, I have sometimes had to read collect and read over 100 reports, media reports, on that particular incident. And there are many every day. So this takes hours every day to do. And so I read lots of incidents, lots of reports of these incidents, and I collect any data that I can, even if I've read, say, 100 incident reports and there's yet another one I could read. I will read it because it may tell me something that the others didn't tell me. Ideally a name, and sometimes local reports have names of victims. So I really am looking for someone local reporting, rather than, say, Reuters. And some of these incidents have a minimum and a maximum, and what that reflects usually is that some media reported an incident and they didn't update, they stayed at a minimum, and I have to report that minimum of civilians killed. Or it could be that somebody perhaps was not a civilian, and yet we always have debates about who is a civilian and who isn't a civilian. So if there is doubt as to whether somebody was a civilian, we would subtract that from the total. So it would come out, say, 29-30, because one of them perhaps wasn't a civilian. So this goes all the way back to 2003, to the invasion. And all these deaths have been recorded and documented without any photographs, but wherever possible, we put descriptions of people based on witnesses. And we're looking really for that. If we really want to contextualize that loss, that individual loss, we need that. So I need to go back now to my PowerPoint. Help me, please.
So when you say description of?
Of the person. That this person was a baker, and he was on his way to work when he was struck by a mortar. And this was told by his brother, who found his body, for example. So anything we have about who that person was and under what circumstances they died. Sometimes we'll say, you know, the brother may say, oh, my brother was such a lovely man, he had 2 children and they miss him. We will put that in. Yes. And one example of where we do have a personal story is about this little girl who was 14 years old, and her name was Lena. And this is what her father said. Her father said about his daughter, she was uncomplicated. One of the stories I remember about her is from when she was in secondary school. One day the headmaster was hitting the students in punishment. She ran to the headmaster and told her, don't hit them, they're still little, you can hit me instead. She was a quiet girl with a smile always on her face. As a teenager, she didn't share her interests with us. But after her death, her teenage cousins told us she liked to keep a diary and write poems. She wanted to grow up to be a doctor. This is what her father said. How did she die? Well, the whole family who lived in Iraq, they left Iraq when they knew Iraq was going to be bombed. And they moved to Tikrit in a farm compound with other families who were also trying to escape the bombing. But the farmhouse was struck. And if I show you the incident in which this girl died, this is where it is with the Iraq Body Count website. Can you help me pick that up? She was one of 19 people killed in that bombing. And interestingly, I recently met somebody in the RAF who was actually one of the bombers. And he may have been the killer of Lena and Mohammed, the brother. I was invited to a formal dinner where the man made a speech and everybody was applauding him. And I thought, why are you the killer of Lena? To him I did.
Or something else.
So this is it. So this is the incident. As you can see, it was the night of 31st of March to 1st of April 2003. There was a group of families sheltering in a farm compound, and these are the people. We have the name of every victim on this, as well as their ages. And if you click, each of them has their individual page that we created. So when I talk about contextualizing a war, this is what I mean. And you know, since Iraq Body Count started this, so many other organizations now, including the United Nations, are documenting casualties in conflicts. And I will show you, with Gaza it's happening a lot more than it did with any other conflict. So Lena was the girl I just showed you, Mohammed was her brother. There were all these other people. The youngest victim was 2 years old. It was a little boy, Mohammed Bashar. And yes, so this is it's in my capacity as a casualty recorder really that I'm here today, rather than an academic. So can we go back, please? Thank you. This is my right hand man. Okay, so the initial invasion, which I remember very well, was documented. We were watching it live. I don't know who else here. Do you remember watching the invasion of Iraq live? So I have here, I'm not going to show them, but there is two links here to CNN and ITN. They were both showing the invasion live and reporting it really in not as a celebration, but so many people were against those invasions, and that was clear in the way that it was reported. So I'm going to start with the good story, in that the press really did cover at the time in a very critical way, and really showing the catastrophic effect on Iraq of the invasion. So this is what I do. Before it goes online, and you see it in that grey way, this is how I record it in my notebooks. I have notebooks for every year that I've done this job, and I start a new page every day, start with the number of those killed, and then the circumstances of their death. Sometimes I have pictures. This is a little Ali Hussein, 2 years old. He was killed in an airstrike. This is his father, his little body away. At the end of every month, I do a total. In that particular month of April 2008, 1,336 civilians had been killed, of which 66 were children. I always had a separate count for children. And 138 were killed by US forces. Why specifically do I record that? Because the media, when they interview me in Iraq, they always want to know that. Who is killing? And then I have to say, well, yes, so there's terrorist activity, so that many died from IEDs, that many died from suicide bombers, and that many were killed by Western forces. They want to know that. I didn't always do this, but because I was being asked so many questions, I started compartmentalizing the killings. So this is what it looks like for me when I do this. This is from the initial reporting on Iraq. So this is an old man approached, disoriented and alone, faltering forward with his cane after 3 warning shots. Finally, US weapons fired a burst and he fell dead. Now this is an Associated Press report. They're reporting how American soldiers were killing, sometimes randomly it seems, people who weren't really doing anything. This old man was Iraqi, of course. This was in Iraq. This was 3 weeks into the invasion. His killing is recorded by Iraq body count. It's on the database. He was killed along with 14 others, and all these media actually reported this. We had Le Monde, CBC, Western media, New York Times, including other victims that were killed, that were identified. So in the beginning, the Western media were really reporting details, which is why Iraq body count was able to start with the database immediately. There was a lot of detail, a lot of reports to collect. So I'm starting with a really good story here of a terrible situation in terms of reporting. And in fact, the sources that we had, so this is from the dossier that Iraq body count, we called it dossier to reflect the other dossier, the first 2 years of the invasion. And this is where the primary sources were. So primary sources, mortuaries, medics, Iraqi officials and so on, eyewitnesses, police. However, all these were still reported by journalists. So they were consulting with everybody and reporting pretty much everything, including deaths from non-violent means. For example, we were able to collect information on deaths of children from diarrhea because they drank water from an area that had been bombed. So they bombed the water purification system, and some children died after consuming that water. And that is, we know, it's a war crime. You cannot drop bombs on the means of life. So that's another thing, another reason why we collect this information. Hopefully, this will serve as a basis for someone to be held accountable at some point for all these deaths. Now, that was the story all the way to 2010. A lot of reporting, you know, the Americans did the raid, again, a lot of reporting by Associated Press, by Reuters, BBC. Those were the main sources of information that I had to collect data. However, what happened in 2010 is, well, the British left in 2009. In 2010, the Americans started to leave. So the media stopped reporting. That was it. It's over now. It's sorted. Iraq now has a government that is democratically elected. Yes, yeah, exactly. So we don't need to report anymore. However, this is all the way to now, from 2003 to 2023, well, the end of 2023. So this is when they stopped reporting, 2010. 2010, the death count that we collected was 4,167 civilians. About the same the next year, twice as many by 2013. So the violence didn't end. There were still horrific attacks. You remember, over 4,000 civilians in 1 year. Imagine if this happened here. So these are the monthly totals. So these years, all the information I had, I was getting from local reports, Middle Eastern reports, mainly Iraqi sources. But then what happened in 2014, see the total, 20,218. What happened in 2014? ISIS. So ISIS comes, the death toll goes up, and the media start reporting again, the Western media. Because then they have to justify the fact that the planes went in and started bombing Western planes. The drone wars started in Iraq to defeat ISIS. It was another, war on terror, a war against a terrorist organization. So the media went crazy. They were reporting all the time. I was being interviewed all the time on what is happening. But what they wanted to know was what the terrorists are doing. What are the terrorists doing? What's ISIS doing? Tell us about the executions. Tell us about the killing, the torture of people. Tell us about the caliphate. So this is what they wanted to know. The BBC especially was notorious in this. I decided never to give another interview to the BBC. Because all they wanted to know was what are the terrorists doing and what can we do to help? What can Britain do to help? They were not interested at all in how Britain may have been killing civilians in Iraq. I tried to sneak it into the interviews. I wasn't always successful. When they were pre-recorded, they would cut that bit out. They didn't want to show it. So the count went up, and then eventually now is under 1,000 a year. I'm still recording, but again, after ISIS was defeated in 2018, again Western media stopped reporting. And all we have is local sources now. We're back again, so it's going up, and then down, based on what the point of reporting it was. And the point, although in the beginning was to criticize the invasion, eventually it became giving support for further strikes in Iraq. Now we come to Ukraine. What I decided to do regarding Ukraine was make a comparison between a report by the BBC on an incident in Ukraine and a report by the BBC on an incident in Gaza. So let me start with Ukraine. Obviously, we're in Ukraine, Britain, against the Russians, we want Ukraine to win, we've been arming Ukraine to win, Ukraine would have lost very quickly if we hadn't been arming them, the way Iraq fell. Not as quickly as Iraq, because Iraq was completely defenseless. But Ukraine is able to keep fighting because of the West. So this is the title of the report. This report was 4th of March 2022. The title is Ukraine War. Russian soldiers killed my family while they fled. Okay, so they're quoting someone, they're quoting this man, who was a policeman, whose family was killed by Russians. So there he is, there is a picture of him with his wife Irina, the 6-year-old daughter Sofia. So a family trying to flee Russian attacks was deliberately targeted. Okay, deliberately is a word they use here, it's not accidental. By Russian soldiers at a checkpoint in southern Ukraine, relatives say. 5 people were killed. So this is now very detailed description of the incident. Russian forces launched their attack in Ukraine. The Fedko family made a desperate attempt to flee, so desperate. The city of Kherson, to join relatives in a village where they felt they would be safe. A bit like that family who fled Iraq to go to this compound to escape bombing. Oleg, who is a police officer, had to stay. His father came to take Irina, the couple's 2 children, 2 months old, electricity and water supplies were cut. The family decided to flee, detailed story about family members. And then they come to this checkpoint that was manned by Russian soldiers. And then terrible things happened. He's taking a picture of me. So this is the continuation of the story. Oleg's brother told the mother, go to Odessa, I have a flat for you, and then screaming starts, shooting, the baby's crying, there are children around, the car was pierced through with bullets, the front, the back, both sides had bullet holes, everybody died in the car, head was covered with blood, was still alive and crying. The Russian military only allowed the family to retrieve the bodies of the adults the following day. The doctor who inspected the bodies told them they all died from multiple, not even one, multiple gunshots. So they really went crazy. The Russian soldiers went crazy on this family, emptying their weapons on them. How does the report conclude? Well, International Criminal Court. So we move from the personal story to accountability and justice. So the International Criminal Court said evidence was being collected on war crimes. Crimes against humanity and genocide by Russia and Ukraine. The UN Human Rights Council voted to establish a commission to investigate alleged human rights violations by Russia in the war. Russian soldiers are now digging trenches, strengthening their positions. Irina said, I wasn't scared before, but I'm scared now. There were some Russian soldiers checking people's phones, pointed the guns at them. Oleg continues his work. He feels bad for failing to protect his family while defending the nation. So we have all sorts of things in that one report. We have war crimes, crimes against humanity, deliberate targeting of babies, multiple gunshot by Russians. They're defending their nation here. It's unimaginable. So, we need to help these people defend their nation, defend their families, defend their children, defend their elderly, says the BBC report. Let's go to Gaza. So in Gaza, the initial information after the 7th of October 2023 came from the health ministry, which they like to say Hamas-run health ministry. And based on the initial numbers, which was 6,763 or something, was the initial, in the space of 3 weeks. At Iraq body count, we decided to make a comparison with Iraq. How many were killed in the initial invasion compared to those killed in Gaza? So the red is Iraq, and the grey is Gaza. So the deaths in Gaza, the civilian deaths, went way beyond the Iraq ones, especially if you think that the population of Iraq was about 26 million at the time. and Gaza is about 2 million. So it's a really a catastrophe, humanitarian catastrophe. So these are the initial figures based on the days from day 1 to day 24, and they just kept increasing. So the Iraq ones eventually started to decrease, but in Gaza they increased. So we are talking a much, much worse disaster. Now, before I go to group by age, do you have any idea about how many civilians have been recorded killed in Ukraine in the space of 2 years?
80,000.
Civilians? Who gave that?
I read somewhere, I don't know.
It's 10,500. It's 10,500 civilians reported by the United Nations. So that's the figure they give. Of course they say many more probably have been killed, but we have, because it's a war zone, we haven't been able to come up. But this is what we've documented. So 10,500 in 2 years. And they call it genocide. So the BBC used the word genocide. They have not used the word genocide for this. That is 3 times that amount in a lot less space of time. So this is how Iraq body counts grouped based on that initial report that is very detailed by the health ministry, by age and gender. And as you can see, the children are the biggest casualty, or were back in October, the children of Gaza. This is the worst. This is age 0 to 8. 0 to 8 were the worst hit in the initial attacks. And this group is 9 to 17. And then 72 plus. Some of the people were over 90 years old who were killed, in fact. So from the Gaza military of health. Now, since then, of course, it all started with the Health Ministry of Gaza reporting. Since then, US President Biden, of course, said that I have no confidence in these numbers because, you know, and again, we are always reminded that these are Hamas figures, and Hamas are terrorists, and therefore we cannot trust what they say. But the UN, obviously, you know, is reliable. The BBC is reliable. CNN is reliable. Iraq body count maybe is reliable, but definitely these Hamas people are not reliable. And in all reports, they made sure that they said this is Hamas run or Hamas reported, Hamas led, to cast doubt on any information that was being reported about Gaza. And so the incident I chose is again a BBC reported incident that I want to compare with the one about Ukraine and that family fleeing violence in Ukraine. So what was reported was the death of a 6-year-old girl, Hind Rajab. So this little girl first was missing. She was caught up. She was trying to flee with members of her family. And they were hit, clearly, by a strike. And the ambulance that went to help them was also hit. So this is the BBC reporting. It starts in a pretty normal way. It says Hind Rajab was fleeing the city with her aunt, uncle, and 3 cousins. The car they were traveling in appears, not sure, appears, so we had deliberate targeting of civilians in the Ukraine report. Here it appears to have come face to face with Israeli tanks and come under fire. This appears. Audio recordings suggest that 6-year-old was the only one left alive in the car, hiding from Israeli forces among the bodies of their relatives. The girl didn't die immediately. The ambulance came, and they were hit as well. When they found this little girl, the windscreen and dashboard of the car was smashed to pieces, bullet holes scattered on the side, in a kind of, without saying who did it. A paramedic who survived told journalists that this little girl was among 6 bodies found in the car, showing signs of gunfire and shelling. Showing signs of it. So the language is very different when they're reporting. Something that is almost identical. It's an identical incident. A few meters away, the remains of another vehicle. The Red Crescent says it's the ambulance that was sent to fetch him, its crew, and here they give the names of the 2 paramedics who were killed when the ambulance was bombed by Israeli forces, the organization says. They could have stopped here and not say that, but no, the organization says that. In a statement, the Red Cross accused Israel of deliberately, so they didn't deliberately target, they accused Israel of deliberately targeting the ambulance as soon as it arrived. This is a quote, that the Israeli occupation deliberately targeted the Red Crescent crew, and so on. How does the report, oh, doesn't end yet, so it continues. So this is a description, we got the coordination, we got the red line, the girl's conversations, his mother said she was waiting for her daughter, she called on the Red Crescent to publish the details of this coordination with the Israeli army. Medical personnel say the rules of war say that they must be protected. Well, so we now have the rules of war. Where's the ICC? There was ICC connection in the Ukraine case, not here. Injured people must be given medical care they need to the fullest practical extent with the least possible delay. Again, these are again relative things, up to the best of their ability. And how does this report end? Because, oh, this is, of course, the report has a picture of the child. This is the 6-year-old girl. This is the car she was found in. I don't know what the other car looks like. I'm expecting something similar. And this is the conclusion. Israel has previously accused Hamas of using ambulances to stop its weapons and fighters. This is how the report ends. So forget everything you read. You know, there's a reason why they bombed the ambulance. Because, you know, it's Hamas's fault, really. Remember how the other report was ending? We are collecting information on war crimes. The ICC, this is genocide. But here, well, if they hit it, that's the reason. Okay, because Hamas used. So this is how this is reported. Since the initial reporting, of course, we have a lot of sources of information. So anybody doing casualty recording on Gaza has plenty of sources of information that I know I found. For example, Gaza Shahid. So there are lots of, on social media, even on Instagram. Some are sharing very detailed reports of specific casualties with pictures of the victims as well that families actually give to them, and they're reporting them. For example, this is from Gaza Shahid. This is the sort of thing that you'll find. It says, martyrs, child angels, Hassan Mohammed Salah, 10 years old, Ismail Mohammed Salah, 9 years old, Hanan Mohammed Salah, 5 years old, Marsh Mohammed Salah, 3 years old, Lian Mohammed Salah, 1.5 years old. 5 young children. These are all siblings. 5 young children, less than 10 years old, innocent children who excel in their studies, obedient, polite, well-behaved. The 5 siblings loved each other very much, were always with each other until they left this life together. Their mother was very interested in raising them in the best possible way until their mother left with them. Most of them are in Arabic. We use Google Translate to translate them. I say we because although we are Iraq body counts, we actually did something as a tribute to those killed in Gaza. And we used pictures for that. Because the Iraq body count database doesn't have any pictures, we decided since there are pictures available and ages and such detail of victims, we would do something which I will share with you today. If you were to click on this, I'm not going to bring it up, but it's the pictures of the children, and each child is smiling in the photo. So, the tribute to the children of Gaza, this is what I want to end with. What we did was we created a really huge spreadsheet, and in that spreadsheet we put the link and detail of every incident we found where there was a pictured victim. Adults, children, everybody. Now, this was thousands of people. We We actually took us 2 months to collect that spreadsheet, to create that spreadsheet. We finally did it in February, and so we created a video just with the children. So every picture of a child, a named child that we found, we put in that little video we made. And I was asking if I could do this here, show a video, and there is internet, so I would like to show you.
Just click this active line.
How can I?
Yeah, just click the line.
Click on the...
This is active line now. No, just
No, you change it. Two click.
Without a mouse, I'm completely lost.
just wait.
And the reason I wanted to show you this is because this is not something that you will see reported by Western media at all. So,
Are you looking for a sound?
no. So we were able to collect all this. Almost entirely from Middle Eastern sources of information. Western media are not reporting this. When they do report, like the example I showed you, it's always with some doubt as to exactly how the incident happened, which is quite deliberate. So, is the Western media champions for peace or for war? And based on what I have found the Western media to be, they're definitely champions for war. Because in the way they're reporting, they were reporting Iraq after ISIS came in 2014, clearly the message was we need to be there bombing. We need to be there to save Iraq from the terrorists. So there was a pro-war there, and when war wasn't anymore an option, because they solved the problem of ISIS, they just didn't report at all. With Ukraine, we have clearly, consistently been told there is urgent Western aid and resistance to protect from Russian aggression. So very much pro-war, very much showing how Russia is committing crimes, how the war needs to continue, and those responsible need to be held accountable. And in Gaza, of course, because we're constantly told by Western media that Israel needs to fight Hamas. They need to fight Hamas. You know, this is another war on terror, just in a smaller area. Again, there is the champions for war. There's somehow justification of the aggression and the need for further aggression, which is why there are no calls for a ceasefire. Which is what made me decide not to vote Labour ever again, probably, as a result of this. Nobody's calling for a ceasefire because, you know, this is Israel's war on Hamas. It is always being presented in that way. It's the war on Hamas, not on Gaza or on Gazans or to the children. It is on Hamas. I experienced this on one occasion when the BBC asked me to work with them on a project that they had, and that was a month of tracking attacks of jihadis. And they said to me, can you use your Iraq body count work? You do it anyway. Can you send us the figures for this particular month of how many people in Iraq were killed by jihadis, because we're doing a global thing. I said, how about anybody else? No, only jihadis. So I know very well how deliberately the media reports some things but doesn't report other things. And again, I find in the West that the main narrative is a war narrative. They do this in order to justify certain wars that the West is becoming involved in, to help, always to defend, never to hurt. And unfortunately that has been consistent throughout my time working for Iraq Body Count, and I see that now in Gaza. And that spreadsheet on which this video was based is growing. We are adding to it. And that data will be there for anyone to use and do anything that they want with it. They could make another video, they could do something else. But the data is there, and I believe that despite the fact that the Western media is ignoring this, we must always find ways to record the impact of any war on civilians. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. 200 students, a big auditorium, and I thought they're going to make noise. I'm going to get really annoyed with them. Not a sound in the room for the entire 10 minutes. The students couldn't look away, actually, from those images.
I mean, what you're doing is so important, you know, it cannot be overemphasized, because, as you know, the International Court of Justice decision unanimously, that's amazing, and decided that there is a plausible case for genocide in Gaza. That means in the next 3-4 years, there will be evidence, you know, collected. I mean, this kind of thing is so important, you know, in the trials that will be taking place in the next 3-4 years, because these things take time, but you're doing an amazing job because you're you're the witness to this, and then you're recording, even though, I mean, you're meticulous, and it's just commendable. And I don't know what to say, but it's I can't say, but there is one, I want to put this in its context as well, because I teach geopolitics and political economy and all that at Gülen. There is something, you know, we used to talk about military-industrial complex. You know how they're connected there. At the moment, I was trying to find on my phone, there's some figures there that the increase on military spending in the West is exponential, like trillion dollars. And I read Financial Times. Not I'm a businessman, but I just look at those shares and all those with the military industrial kind of areas. It's enormous, you know. These kind of also, there is one more thing we need to add to this. This is not just military industrial complex. This is actually military industrial media complex. Now we add to media to justify these, you know, these violence committed by the states in the West, you know. And I think I remember, I think it's a Turkish or Palestinian poet who said once that, where is the East? Where is the East? He said, the East where the bombs of the West fall, you know? It's where the East is. Anyway, I don't want to talk too much, but I think it's time to engage it.
No,
we have 5 minutes.
We have about 5 minutes break. So anyone...
Yeah, let's have a break, and sorry.
And, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll then have the questions.
In 5 minutes we'll be back.
Okay, yeah, I've forgotten that. Thank you.
To the room, I would just like, because Tunç mentioned that I've written a book about this based on my research, and also as an academic, and I would like to read just the ending of my book, because the ending of my book expresses the different ways we can approach this and the different ways that I have approached this. First, as an academic, like Tunç was saying, you teach geopolitics, you think of conflict in a particular way, but as a casualty recorder, I think of this in a very different way. So this is how my book ends. In 2017, an NGO called Save the Children asked me to provide some figures for Mosul in the January-April period, so just a few months. How many civilians had been killed and how many of them were children, and how they died. The latter is hard to ascertain, as reports tend to say among those killed were women and children, without giving figures for either. However, based on a small number of reports that did mention the number of children killed, I came up with this list of 84. 12 had starved to death. 38 were killed by coalition airstrikes. 4 were executed. 6 were shot dead. 11 were killed by shelling and rockets. 2 were killed in drone attacks. 10 by IEDs and car bombs, and 1 died by torture. Why did these children die? Were their deaths a result of the struggle for hegemony and increased hegemonic penetration of the Middle East? Were they the outcome of clashing civilizations? Or of the ideology and actions of counter-hegemonic anti-imperialist resistance movements? Perhaps, in a global context, their deaths were the consequence of a power vacuum and power shift during the crisis of a dying international order. As I continue the body count, it is those innocents that have starved to death, that have been killed in airstrikes, blown up, shot and tortured that year, that month, that week, or that day, that I keep in my mind. As an academic, I often think of the world in terms of power, of states, of interests and of structures. As a casualty recorder, it is the boy in the orange shorts whose 3-year-old body was pulled from the rubble of his home. It is Ahmed Rawel who ran with a bomb in his arms. It is Shukran Ghanim Hussein. It is Nemat Razeri. It is Fatima Talib Khazal. It is those police officers, those teachers, farmers, children that drive me to search, to record, to document. It is ultimately to those Iraqis and to all Iraqis that my book is dedicated.
It's very
I think we'll start the question and answer session. I don't want to...
Or comments.
Comments.
Your-
Yes. So let's, because we want to have a kind of, we have to observe some fairness. So let's, because I want everybody to get involved, so please try to keep, how long do we have? How long do we have?
Until 8:30.
There's a
So
big clock over there.
40 minutes.
I think, yeah, clock, well, yeah, okay.
Tunç, there is
Thank
one
you.
question.
Keep your eye on it.
One question
Okay,
over
so
there.
I'll proceed, the lady.
Yeah, it's not a question, it's a quite determined to see all the children killed, because if they do continue to be alive, they would be the next generation terrorists. I mean, it was it was on BBC. It wasn't somewhere that, as an alternative media channel. It was so shocking. Just a contribution, because
Yeah,
we were
they
told.
allowed that to be aired and to be said.
Yes, they were.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Good point.
I start from the last sentence. The organization name was Save the Children. If I am wrong, correct me. They awarded Tony Blair with something and they withdraw, I think. We can check. So it is also funny how an organization for children, pro-children, rewards a guy who is the source of the kind of one of the sources, that one. Also, in the break, we were talking about this dehumanization is, I think, very big part of justifying that, especially certain groups. Femicide is one of them, Kurdish people in Turkey, one of them. First, you show them so worthless, like animals, and Israel doing it for Palestinians, and the opposite goes for the wonderful fair-skinned people in Ukraine. All of their life is important, but see that disproportional affection and not care attitude is interesting. And again, you were talking about during the presentation about a tendency towards military and spending exponentially increasing. Although I can't listen to BBC more than 5 minutes, I feel nauseous. In the last month, I noticed two things. First, they were showing militarization. They were talking about askerlik ne demekti? Military service, which is not compulsory here. But they were interviewing some children, little children, and showing the army serving your country in a very lovely light. I noticed that in normal programs, at BBC Radio 4. And the other is also kind of whitewash of Israel. I think this is after almost all world start disliking what Israel is doing, not the governments. And now they are probably only showing it is because of Netanyahu, who was very lovely, heroic guy in the past, but now he is losing away a little bit. And that kind of comments I am listening on radio stations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good point, yes.
But because you were saying that some lives matter and others don't, the Ukrainian, obviously, victims are important and others are not. I have been asked this many times, not by journalists, but by people to whom I say that I, document civilian deaths in Iraq. And they say, oh, are you Iraqi? And I say, no, I'm not. Oh, so why do you do it then? That's the next question.
Yeah.
Why do you do it? And I'm so offended by that question, that I should only care, for example, about Greek people.
Yeah.
because I'm Greek, and nobody else really, they could die, the rest could die, it doesn't matter. And I said, what do you do? And isn't it emotionally quite painful to do this? And I said, well, so why do you go on? But they don't understand that when you do this, when you witness this injustice and suffering, that only drives you to do it more, rather than put you off.
Absolutely. I mean, I had the same experience when I wrote the article on Armenian genocide. You know, the denial, actually, you're absolutely right, how genocide starts with demonization. You demonize them first, exclude them, and the final stage, you carry out all that, the final stage is the denial. Denial is the continuation of the genocide, in many ways. So we reach that stage that, oh, they don't kill it, or they're trying to justify it, and the question, why are you defending Armenians? You're not Armenian. This is new tribalism, you know, why do I have to be an Armenian? You know, this is a kind of tribalism. Well, if you're defending Iraqis, why you're not Iraqi? Why are you doing this? Almost we all have to defend our own tribe. Anyway, I think
But also, can I just say, when I was doing my PhD with Bülent as my supervisor, I remember people asking me, so is your PhD about Greece? I was asked this question a lot, and I was saying, no, what's it about then? I said, it's about Bosnia. Oh, why? Very surprised. They expected that it would be about Greece, obviously. Why should I care about something else, some other group of people? This is very common, and in academia, where you expect to see people who are actually, you know, global, more global than that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then,
first of all, thank you very much. I mean, it is such an effort that you put it in. All your heart is there. It's an excellent piece of work. I immediately think about who's going to use this one. That is the most important. This material can be used in many different ways. I wish to see more people attacking the liberalism as ideology, because what we are discussing about, whether it is the media or whether it's ordinary people, we have no one-free judgment at all. All our judgment based on our, where can I get the benefit, how it will be good for me, etc. That's based on that. So racism also stems from there. And it is not only the racism, it's all the nationalism, it is all the ethnicity, you name it, and divide, the major issue to divide. So liberalism based on the value-free judgment, especially jurisprudence, and you are speaking about international jurisprudence, how can I expect them to be value-free? How can I expect the national jurisprudence are value-free? None of them are. So when you attack the liberalism is an ideology of the capitalist mode of production. You are attacking the entire system. I think we are past a period that we are instead making a lot of work on they are doing this, they are doing that, they are doing this. They want us, basically. They want Africa, giving it to them without the Africans, and they want the India without the Indians out there. That is so obvious. I mean, each year, each decade, when you look at it, there is atrocities more or less the same. I mean, when you put the American history, you can find a lot. So you need to come to the conclusion that we need to do something to get rid of them. Is it war, or is it something else? What we need to do. I think this kind of work is very important for us to make sure that the people who has no compassion towards the victims, they need to be shown the reality, yes, because it is so easy around the table, all of us believe you and applaud you and thank you. but there are other people who don't. So this sort of material is very good for them. But also, who's going to take them there? You're only one person. There are many, many people who utilize this material. Yeah? Some sort of things needs to be started like we used to do in 1970s, 1980s, before that as well. And now, more and more and more, they become desperate to bash somebody and take a piece of things, whatever is there, and the military complex and the economy as well. So this is, for me, is very important, and you enlightened this issue.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bülent. No, Ismail. No, sorry, I am not. No, sorry.
Sorry. I said thank you so much. This video is so powerful, and I hope you keep it safe, and that is a good, strong evidence of whether you like it or not. It's genocide, and so many innocent children died in this unnecessary war, and I'm sure the West and the US are complicit. We know that in creating this disaster. What would your wish be like? Well, who would speak for them, and how would you hopefully eventually see that the people who were responsible, like Netanyahu and whoever, for this genocide, I have to call it genocide, even though they try to deny it, to get arrested and put on trial as a war criminal.
Yes, and I would go there as some sort of researcher witness, expert witness. I would go to a trial, if it ever happened, about someone being held accountable for crimes in Iraq that I've been documenting in these years. Unfortunately, the only trial that my colleagues from Iraq Body Count have testified in is the Assange trial, who exposed crimes like these. And the WikiLeaks that Assange actually published outside added 15,000 civilian deaths to our database. And this man now is fighting for his life. And those are the only trials, unfortunately, that take place of those who expose these crimes, and not of the criminals.
Okay. Have you finished, sorry?
I've finished.
Yes, brilliant.
Something related to what both of you said. Of course, either something has to be done soon to stop these kind of criminal activities in the world. But the actual real value of what Lily is doing, what Iraq Body Count is doing, is recording something. So once we record something, it will stay there. So it is almost like we are creating the memory for the future generations. So if you don't record, then people will forget about this and to just disappear. Also, it's a responsibility to those people who were killed. To those victims, we have this responsibility. That's why Lily made it very clear that they are trying to find all the information, not just the numbers, names, if possible pictures, and all the other things, ages, where they lived, what they liked when they were alive. So this kind of information, once we record them, they will stay forever and ever.
It's like a digital memorial.
Yes.
Creating a digital memorial.
Yeah.
Sorry, just Ismail put his hand, and then after you, yeah? What? After Ismail.
Well, thank you for just echoing.
Alana, do say more about yourself.
Well,
please.
most importantly, thank you for what you're doing. It's just, I can't tell you how grateful I am that you've done this. I was saying to your daughter that it's remarkable what you've done and what you're continuing to do. And I can't remember 2003, but I have recently, well, I lived in Iraq for 2 years. I was working there as a journalist, and I now work for an NGO which is trying to get reparations and basically promote justice for survivors of ISIS atrocity crimes in Iraq using international law, but it's through the Iraqi system. And it's been interesting, and every day I'm learning and I'm thinking, how can this be applied for the crimes? And it will come, and it should come, and something that I hope I'm working on, hopefully more, and would like to go more into this field. Sorry, that's a ramble, but my comment is that I, over the past 2 years being in Iraq, have shared the Iraq body count with lots of Iraqis who actually didn't know of its existence, and each time they found it incredibly profound and actually quite emotional, because they themselves have very little demonstrable evidence of some of their memories from childhood, or like there's obviously it's all terribly narrative driven. You know, the Iraqi government today, you know, for example, the 21st anniversary last week, this week, no comment, silent. Iraqis obviously remember that day. There's no public remembrance. The Kurds, if they remember it, celebrate. And those in power today, the government politicians, they are in power because of the war, and it's this awkward, you know, if it is celebrated, it's called the liberation, you know, because there's all of this anti-Ba'athist, you don't want to commemorate because then you might be seen as pro-Saddam, and obviously, you know, the sectarian issues. So I guess there is actually no equivalent to this database in Iraq. Certainly not to the same level. So as we were talking and presenting, I was thinking so much about the emotional need for this, and how, you know, potentially even one day, you know, the idea that it can even be more translated to Arabic, or, you know, do you know what I mean, something like that, because my friends who've seen it will speak English, and yeah, I'm just wondering, I guess, sorry, my thoughts aren't very well formed, but for example, in Gaza, obviously this information is much more available in Arabic. Yeah. It's not to the same level in Iraq. And it's really important. And the other comment I wanted to make, well, it's a question really. I'm just wondering why, I mean, it's both simplistic but also quite complex thing to answer, but it's far too easy to say, you know, it's just racism. Or what you were saying, you know, made me think a lot as well about structures and interpretation. But it is almost hard to watch this different coverage and think anything other than it is just Western bias. People don't identify to this. I would just be curious as to what you think, what the level of, you know, bias or lack of coverage is to do with, you know, global power structures, emotional connection, lack of context. Probably all of it. That's my question.
The Western bias, from the beginning and even all the way to now, is clearest to me when people say, yeah, but these people, they're always fighting. These people, it's always these people in the Middle East, they're always fighting anyway. I mean, they've been fighting for thousands of years. You know, this is not just now with the invasion, or with Saddam Hussein, they're always like that, these people. And I remember hearing similar words when it came to people, to Balkan people. They say, oh yeah, these people, you know, the Serbs, they're always fighting.
Clinton said, doesn't he?
Yeah.
You know, he said, oh, they have been at each other's throat for centuries.
They're not civilized, that's the point. They're not civilized like us. They're uncivilized people. And I came across that first with the Balkan, in the Balkan context, and then in the Middle Eastern context. And in some ways, well, whether we do or we don't, there's always going to be wars there anyway. Because they're like that. People there are like that.
I think there is a, briefly, thank you, have finished?
Yes.
Yeah, just briefly, if I may, from Ismail's, take from Ismail's, you know, there should be education. There is education which is called education for peace, critical pedagogy, yeah? How is hegemony, imperial power is sustained? There are institutions, there are guns and all that, but most importantly, it's about how the consent is manufactured in the West. And the journalists play, I'm sorry, you're a journalist.
Well, sort of, I'm moving towards...
Yeah, well, that's the journalist's job,
But, yeah.
to create, to manufacture the consent. Once you declare these zones are barbaric, disorderly, dark, mysterious, you know, Churchill said Russia was not wrapped in a mystery. Once you declare that, then you have the justification to intervene, to maintain law and order, because you have the white supremacy, you know. I mean, just take the definition of terrorism quickly. What is this? What is terrorism? We look at the US, I give it to my students, like, look at this definition of the terrorism. And then they read it like, definition of the terrorism, more or less the same, isn't it? It's just carrying out political violence for political objectives, right? And that bomber bombing Iraq indiscriminately, and then you have 9/11 people directing the planes and hitting. They're both terrorist acts, you know. I mean, that guy bombing Iraq indiscriminately is a state terrorist, you know, because that terrorism definition also applies to state terrorism. You know, the state actually was the first terrorist. then real terrorism is reaction to that. In Ireland, in all places, it's the same thing. Anyway, I don't want to turn into...
And they're far more powerful as terrorists because they have more resources.
Yeah, Robespierre, you know, the age of terror actually is the French Revolution. The state was the terrorist. Robespierre called the state as a terror because they exterminated the revolutionaries. So this is how it started. So the first terrorist was the state, and the last terrorist is still the state. So yours, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, name of the seminar is Champions for Peace or War. Actually, peace, peaceful times in capitalist system, capitalist states, while capitalist states running their countries and other countries, peaceful times used by them to prepare war. Not only buying and producing new guns and weapons, also ideologically using the education, schools, all the property, especially media. What can we do during this peaceful time to expose this situation? Because imperialist countries cannot stop attacking, opening to other countries. For example, if there is a social and economical problems in your country and you cannot solve them, you've got to go out. If you got money, you can invest. You haven't got money, so you prepare yourself to wars, to attack other countries, to bring your own people together. Look, forget about everything, economy or something like that. We are involved. So, that's why we need to, you know, the people we need to use peaceful times for this type of organizational, organize themselves to expose, display this situation, and wonderful you know, the proof of the war, but we are only here about 15,000 people. Already know about it. How can we make it other people to listen about it, see about it? The books, but books needs to be distributed. So this type of organizational duties we need to fulfill.
Great, thank you. Ismail,
I just remembered Tralian Wars.
Brilliant.
I just want to bring it to Iraq body count again. Just one comment and maybe a response from Lily. I have been in this country for almost 40 years, so a large part of my life. And during these 40 years, I don't lots of things. I mean, I studied, I'm lecturing for the last 30 years, and I published many books. But the most significant, and for me the most important contribution I think I did was being one of the founders of Iraq Body Count in 2003, February. So that thing is much more significant than everything else put together, which I did in my life during the last 40 years. I just want to say this. And I wonder how you feel about your contribution.
I feel exactly the same. Out of all the work I've done in my life, by far the most meaningful is this, actually. And in some ways I passed this on to my daughter a little bit as well. And I remember when she was little, I had this book called The Language of the War on Terror that she innocently took to school with her. She was in primary school and she was told off. How could you bring a book like this to school? And she came back and said, Mom, I was told off. I took this with me. But I like the fact that I was able, although I didn't really tell her anything about my work too much, but she used to come in and out of my office when I was collecting all the data. And I influenced her in some ways to pursue, you know, international relations and to actually care about these sort of things, because it has been the most meaningful thing to me, much more than being a lecturer.
Absolutely.
Or
you're a humanitarian.
yes, to be a humanitarian.
Absolutely, this is what matters. Any other questions? Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? So I think I saw something online about this, but it made me think about again the structures of the world. But the work you do is arguably actually more important even than save. You mentioned Save the Children. Anecdotally, Save the Children lost 7 children in Mosul last year, which is also just terrible. But it's very important, and it's not a registered NGO, for example. It doesn't get public funding. I think there's no sense that it's part of the state. But other organisations that do such important work are, perhaps recognisable, or by institutional funding. So I was interested in how it's funded and whether you've sought to engage in, I don't know exactly who funded, but I'm thinking like the Foreign Office, for example, has funded similar projects. I remember human beings, but that's
Iraq Body Count is not funded. I work as a volunteer. I do this because it's important to me. It's not a job. We are not funded, so we do this in our own time. However, at the same time, because we're not funded, we are free. We won't be told what data to gather and what not to gather. We are completely free to actually report and document everything that we find. So it has worked in some ways well for us that we're not funded.
And can I just add one more thing?
Go on.
And when it was first started, as you remember, I told you, you were not part of it then, because you were much younger. In February 2003, John Sloboda, Kay Williams and I, we just were having a coffee in the coffee shop in the building where my office is in the university, and we were talking what to do, how to do something, because we knew that the war is coming. So the protest movements happened, and we were really desperate. And John's idea, John said we have to find a way of recording civilian casualties, because nobody else will do this. Neither parties are interested, so we have to do this. And he designed the whole system on the basis of that. And then both John and I, John was a psychology professor, I was in international relations, we asked our own department, saying that, can you give us a space? We will do this really human security project. Like, it's about civilian casualties. We are not interested in whose war this or whose fault is this. We are just going to record the casualties. Both of us were told by our line managers in the university, no, this is too political, we cannot involve it. So therefore we couldn't start this in the university's website. Maybe it was a good thing, because then maybe after a while when Iraq Body Count started to be criticized in the initial stages by various official parties like American government, British government, then the university would have stopped this at that point. So that's why John went and started a completely private initiative.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for giving us a background, how it started, and actually, you know, okay, we are university lecturers, what we do in the class was our job, but this is much more important because this thing, you know, as I said, for instance, International Court of Justice will be collecting evidence, and this is like you're a witness to history. It's not, you're not doing this for money or reputation or anything, you're just doing, I'm witnessing this and recording it. I mean, for instance, during the Holocaust, the same thing happened, you know, people collected the names and all those people then, and of course when we are running out of time, because I saw in your book banality, you know, the banality of the killing from Hannah, and you will be inspired by, I believe, the banality of evil, where we can blame Netanyahu, Hitler, whatever, but the banality of evil concept is a very interesting, you know. All sorts of people deny there's also banality of the evil. The ordinary people this is, you know, trivializing it. Or we are all, in a way, complicit when we say, you know, that evil is not just some one person, evil person doing evil things to people, but, you know, the pilot dropping the bomb, a journalist writing a pro-Israeli piece. They're all complicit in this. This is, you know, every day they are part of this crime in many ways. I'm really impressed by that, the banality of this. This is an amazing book. Not only the facts there, but the way you've written them is really so well versed and so impressive. Thank you very much. I think it's time to wrap up and
yes,
just
thank you.
show up.
Thank you.